Hello everyone, welcome to All Out Coach. I'm excited about kicking off my series of episodes on company culture. Today's my first one in this series. In this episode, I'm going to first discuss two different types of company cultures. Second, I'm going to discuss what type of individual mindsets are most productive among your employees in any organization. Finally, in my third segment, I'll discuss how companies can inspire the most productive employee mindsets. Let's begin with the first topic of this episode and discuss the two main types of company cultures. We've all heard of growth or performance cultures, but what do they really mean? In this episode, I'll tell you 7 differences between growth and company cultures in specific categories, such as communication style, competition type among employees, decision making, adaptation to change. And I'd like you to remember these 7 specific differences by the end of this segment. Now, before I get into these specific differences, I'm going to provide you with an overview of what makes growth different from performance cultures in general. So let's begin. Regardless of the type of company where we work, we get compensated for the time and effort we contribute. Companies always expect results from us. However, results are by definition episodic and are seen at a given time or cross-section. The measurement of your performance relates to the work that you do continuously, but it is impractical for you to be evaluated all the time. Therefore, you get evaluated once a year for your performance, twice, sometimes even quarterly. So your performance evaluation is always primarily based on milestones or successes, or rather episodes of success, which we assume reflect your routine daily performance. This assumption makes performance evaluations imperfect. It's not always correct. However, performance-based companies do not concern themselves with this gap, as they expect you to provide bottom-line results, such as sales, quality improvement, subscriptions, memberships, etc. You may ask, well, how's that different from other companies? We all work to demonstrate results. Yes, that's right. But in a performance company, only your results matter, or primarily your results. Its leadership motivates you for a result, or for a performance. Notice I'm using the word motivates, not inspires you, because motivation has a short-term duration, while inspiration has a long-term impact as well as potential. Thus, performance companies motivate you to study to pass the test, whereas growth cultures inspire you to study in order to learn the subject so well that you eventually become an expert in it for years to come. In this analogy, growth-focused companies invest more time in developing their individual employees. They invest their resources in employee growth more continuously and not episodically. These are some of the general differences between the two cultures. Now, it is true, a growth-focused company also expects performance. However, performance-based cultures tell you the goals and their expectations of your reaching those goals, while growth cultures do not just tell you the goal, but they also teach you how to reach that goal and why you should reach that goal. As a result, growth cultures are up to date with today's environment, which now includes millennials who are entering the workforce and who want to know why it is that they're working and what is the purpose of their project, their task, their function, their role. Performance-focused companies create an intense, high-pressure environment, assuming that the environment alone will inspire its employees to stretch farther and reach goals. There's a significant difference between the two approaches, but growth cultures also want something in return from their employees. They look for their own growth in return, long term. It's a business after all. But growth cultures invest more than performance-focused companies in your growth in order to achieve their organizational growth, their transformation and success. To them, what matters is not just your results today, but how to inspire you to deliver continuous improvement, cost savings, new systems and technology so that you can keep reproducing such results in the future. Now, after making these general distinctions, let's now describe 7 of the most common characteristics of one or the other. And let's start with communication style. There are clearly differences between the two types of organizations in their standard modes of communication. In a performance company, there's a task-oriented approach to work. You're given a task which you perform. In fact, you receive a clear command, a deadline, and a limited channel of communication with an extensive organizational hierarchy or structure that you're led to consider. Finish one task, move on to another. There's not a lot of integration or of efforts, interests, or experience. So the operative word that describes communication in these types of companies is command. It's a command type of communication, where there is primarily a one-way traffic of ideas or orders. In a growth culture, you're expected to enter into a true dialogue or an ongoing dynamic free flow of meaning with your colleagues and management. This is a solutions-oriented focus where you're given problems and you use dialogue and exchange with your colleagues and management to come up with solutions to the problems. So unlike command, dialogue is the most common type of communication in a growth-based company that utilizes time but that transcends the limitations of time. And let me explain what I mean by that. In a dialogue-focused company, some meetings may run over planned time, but they often uncover more practical solutions during that extra time spent in a meeting. Thus, the first of 7 major differences between a growth and performance mindset is the command versus dialogue mode of communication. I'd like you to remember this. Now, the next major difference I'll highlight is in decision-making category. Performance-focused companies emphasize who makes final decisions and how to rise up in the ranks to become one of the decision makers more than the impact of the decision on the company and the decision itself. They may do this without realizing it or without communicating so transparently. But when you observe such companies, essentially, they put the decision itself and its impact in second place. These companies thrive in the currency of power or political capital involved in making critical decisions. Yet, as you know, power is extremely subjective, fleeting, and volatile, and investing in the power market is more unpredictable than into the stock market. Therefore, people need to limit their power displays and take many vacations from their power trips to recharge. Growth cultures, on the other hand, emphasize the decisions being considered, observations and specific methods being used to arrive at the decision and conclusions. Such companies inspire their employees to constantly test different methods to arrive at better decisions, more sharp observations, conclusions, and ultimately solutions. The process they promote is simply science, or the scientific method. So remember the second distinction of 7 between the two company cultures. Power versus science-based decision-making in performance and growth companies, respectively. Now let's discuss how these organizations develop their products and pipelines and how they present them to their employees and customers. In a performance-focused culture, there's an overwhelming focus on the impressions you make within your company as well as outside of your company, of your company's technology or brand. Performance cultures act fast. They do not overly concern themselves with content. Instead, they concern themselves with delivery, regardless of the content or the ingredients of the product, which delivers profit. They're primarily concerned with sales and net profit with less emphasis on quality. And this approach describes business in most companies in general, relatively speaking, because in order to be sustainable, all companies need to turn profit. However, there are different approaches in businesses, of which there are much fewer, such as growth companies. These companies may not be as fast to provide services, but they work in the background to maximize the global benefit of the content or of the ingredients used in their product pipelines. So a growth culture company will highlight their content of their brand as comprehensively as possible and let their brand speak for itself, while utilizing strategy to communicate that content to the right people. Thus, the third difference is a content versus impressions focus of product development and delivery in growth and performance-based organizations, respectively. The next category that I'd like to discuss is adaptability to change in the environment. All organizations must react swiftly and effectively to changes in the business environment, their competitive landscape, their evolving technologies, or political and socioeconomic developments at the time. Performance-focused cultures tend to react to perceptions of reality. And let me illustrate an example. When there's a new problem or delay in manufacturing a product that is discovered by the frontline employees in a performance-centered company, because of the fear of underperforming in such a culture and not meeting company objectives or internal competition against others, this problem in manufacturing is often minimized and becomes more and more positive at every level of the hierarchy as it is communicated up the chain of command. In fact, problems may be minimized to such an extent that by the time they reach the senior executive management and the CEO, the real problem that requires immediate action may appear as an accomplishment, and as a result, the organization reacts based on some perception of reality. In fact, in such a situation, a performance-based company may not even react at all. By the time it gets to the decision-making level, the management or executive management or the board of directors, for example, simply because of the fear of underperforming or some internal competition against each other. Now, growth-focused companies identify the reality of change in the environment exactly as it is and face reality directly at every level, maintaining not just a semblance of positivity, but an action plan and a positive reaction to any form of reality. Because positivity is a reaction. It's not a perception. And growth cultures react to reality, not to perceptions. As a result, they're more adaptable to change, and they're able to affect change to a greater degree. Thus, the fourth distinction is very important for you to remember between the two types of cultures. Reaction to reality versus reaction to perception of reality. So reality versus perception. in terms of adaptation to change in the environment, in a growth and performance culture, respectively. Now, let's examine the target for the service. What is the audience of the service the leadership of the two different cultures provides? In a growth organization, employees and their customers are all unique individuals. Thus, such companies are able to truly reach their employees. They know they need to take care of the employees because they realize that until the company shows that it cares about its employees won't listen. Regardless of how emotionless an employee's life or function may be, the key for the growth company is to be able to reach the employees and ultimately the company's customers' emotions. At the end of the day, we have to remember that regardless of our background or status, we all seek people with whom we can share emotions. It's plain and simple. You may call it empathy or many other names, but I call it the person. The focus on growth-based teams is on the total person. So once you feel that you're in such an environment, if you're a sales representative, for example, you approach the customer you're visiting as actually a person, not your customer. And therefore, you will address them in a different, more personalized way. In performance-focused companies, the rank-and-file employees are the customers of the executive management. These companies understand and they regard their employees as their customers whom they have to appease. Management in such companies know that they buy services from them, and the employees' customers are assets, just like the employees are assets to the executive management. The result of such a view of whom the leadership provides their services is that the employees also treat their own key stakeholders as customers, not as people. There may not be many things wrong with this. This is regarded as standard customer service. And this may work well sometimes, but there is a missed dimension of reaching personal service, of creating personal, meaningful relationships, to take that performance to a different level, to take it from short to long term. If you, as business leaders, address the people that you face as simply individuals that they are. Therefore, the fifth difference between growth and performance cultures lies in the type of service it offers its employees and customers, with the focus on a person versus customer, respectively. Let's talk about the last two differences. All organizations promote competition, as it is beneficial up to a certain point and under particular definitions and conditions, however. Thus, the sixth difference is reflected in the type of competition encouraged in these two different organizations. In a growth culture, people primarily compete against themselves, and they compete against others by competing by the rules. So they're more likely to compete by the rules when they compete against others. But primarily, they compete against themselves over time. They're professional in their demeanor towards others. Whereas in a performance culture, individuals compete against others regardless of the rules. Because competition is the best mode of survival. So they do not have an appreciation or a regard for respect to the same extent that individuals do in a growth culture. The interdynamics between employees is not a priority. Performance is in a performance traditional culture. They're more likely to compete as if they were at war in a performance-focused company. What makes war different is that at war, people can resort to illegal weapons, yet not be held accountable for them. Because of the state of war, during which they're used. Therefore, the sixth characteristic difference between the two business cultures is reflected by promoting a sports versus war-like competition. Competition is synonymous with the business world today, and it always targets some result or objective that needs to be reached. Organizations view and value their team members' contributions and time quite differently. And this brings me to the last, seventh difference between two cultures. Well, for example, intentions and efforts count in a growth culture. People are not punished as long as they demonstrate appropriate intentions and significant efforts, even if the results are not extraordinary. In a performance culture, results are the means to an end, and they're the bottom line. Thus, growth and performance-focused companies evaluate their employees' efforts based on intentions versus results, respectively. Now that I have defined growth and performance-based organizations, as well as reviewed in detail the 7 major characteristic differences between growth and performance-based organizations, I will conclude this first part of this episode. Let's take a break, and next we'll discuss 2 types of employees that every company, regardless of the industry, should have. Loud coach. I'm back from my break. Welcome back. In the last segment, I reviewed the main differences between a growth and a performance culture. In this segment, I'll describe how you can create a growth culture by inspiring 2 most productive mindsets among all your employees. And I will tell you the specific qualities of each of the 2 mindsets that make them so productive, which I'd like you to remember and consider by the end of this segment. So let's begin. To become a company that grows consistently, without limits, while collaborating together in one direction, means the company has to be multidimensional. It means that the team needs to achieve synergy in which the total result of all individual efforts equals more than their sum. And you can best achieve this goal by encouraging all your employees to become sports athletes and scientists, regardless of their previous background or current function, and whether or not it is related to sports or science. So, the sports and the scientist mindsets are the 2 most productive mindsets that I'd like to talk about. I've observed these 2 to be most efficient and most productive throughout my career in the industry. And I've interviewed many different CEOs across different industries, and I've come to this conclusion based on their input and their case studies as well. So if you encourage more sports athletes and scientists among your employees, even your janitor will look for new detergents, better products, or techniques with which to clean your offices. Think about that as you start or restructure your company. So now I'm going to talk about why all your employees should model sports athletes and provide you with 4 different reasons that are specific. What are these characteristics of sports athletes that you need to look for? Well, first, sports athletes are naturally self-driven, because they constantly try to break their personal records. So they stretch themselves farther. That is their goal. They visualize running across the finish line. Therefore, the first quality of sports athletes that makes them so desirable and productive in business across different industries that you should remember is that they break personal records. Because you need your employees to compete against themselves and drive themselves to break their own records at work. That's number 1. Now, number 2, the second quality of sports athletes. They compete by the rules against others with respect for other competitors, meaning they conduct themselves in a sportsmanlike manner. So, competing by the rules is number 2. And regardless of the outcome of the competition, they congratulate and acknowledge their opponents. In fact, the fundamental quality is central to being a sports athlete. True sports athletes know that if they do not compete by the rules and use steroids to enhance their performance, for example, they'll lose their championship status. They'll be stripped of their medal and lose their opportunity to compete in the future. So they do not undermine each other in what becomes a zero-sum game for all. The second factor that distinguishes sports athletes, therefore, is that they compete against others by the rules. Number 3, sports athletes learn to pass the baton and to collaborate. Regardless of what pinnacles they reach, they know that they need a coach. Whether it's a team sport, it's an individual sport, they always have a coach. Regardless of what personal record they have achieved. Regardless of where they are in their sports career, they know that they need a training partner who stretches them farther and who inspires them to break new personal records. So they learn to pass the baton and collaborate. They know that many different aspects of their discipline, regardless of the type of sport, requires them to participate in some form of relay at one time or another. For example, history shows that there have been track and field relay teams with the best individuals and world record holders on the team that were nevertheless not able to win gold medals at 4 Olympic Games in a row because of the sheer inability to pass the baton appropriately. So during that moment of passing the baton is when they lost their edge and their chance for a medal or a gold medal, the one that everyone expected. The baton passes were either dropped, the batons were dropped, or the baton passes were too slow, uncoordinated. Those were the reasons every single time that they failed as a team. In this example, I'm referring to American men's and women's track and field 4x100 meter sprint relay teams, who have traditionally always won these sprint relays. Again, learning to pass the baton and to collaborate is essential in a growth organization. The fourth and last attribute of sports athletes is critical, and possibly the most important to consider in a growth culture. Sports athletes master new techniques through practice. They know that they need to spend days and often years of practice in order to make minimal adjustments to find a new technique that will allow them to make significant improvements of large magnitude and cut hundreds, in fact critical hundreds of seconds off their 100-meter sprint, for example. They may practice to find a new technique in the long jump after completing their run-up to generate more height and distance and decide whether or not to continue leaping forward and making steps in the air one leg at a time after they launch into a jump, or to leap with both legs together. Long jumpers may also change the numbers of steps they make or the length of the steps in their run-up prior to a jump to generate the right speed as well as momentum. So, as many coaches often say, in order to become an expert at anything, you need at least about 10,000 hours of practice. Let's shift gears into a different industry, a different field, to make this point. The manner in which Steve Jobs prepared prior to his presentations illustrates the importance of this sports-like approach to practicing. Steve Jobs focused on days and weeks of rehearsals prior to his presentations, including the last 2 days which were full dress rehearsals. And it was through his practice habits that he was able to deliver presentations that were memorable and that were transformational. Regardless of what you think about Steve Jobs, as a person, as a businessman, minimal changes in technique often translate in large, significant differences and improvements that may mean the difference between qualifying and not qualifying for the Olympics, or between a gold and a silver medal, or between consistent and inconsistent results, for example. So, sports athletes focus on practicing and working extra hours to master techniques in order to deliver results that are consistent and improvements that reach new heights. Now let's examine the scientific mindset. What makes it so desirable among all your employees? Why should all employees be scientists? Well, first, they constantly make observations. After making observations, scientists record them to develop and compare results or findings at different conditions. Capturing observations is critical to making them and the experiment relevant and valuable to more people, because recording them brings observations to life and legacy, unlike memories and recall, which you cannot always count on. Making observations all the time means that your employees are aware. They're aware of the environment, aware of themselves, but making observations systematically takes it to a different scientific step as a part of the entire scientific method. Of course, as you know, scientists then generate hypotheses based on their observations, and then use and apply different methods that are critical to test their observations and analyze the results that they record. Secondly, scientists constantly ask questions that generate hypotheses. Just making observations is not sufficient. Studies that test one hypothesis often generate new hypotheses, and this dynamic process, or the scientific method, is essential in carrying science and any industry forward. As a result, there's a never-ending pool of questions that scientists constantly seek and create, and then respond to. These questions are essential. Number 3, they create new solutions to problems or questions they pose throughout their experiments. Again, just asking questions and making observations alone do not paint the full picture of why scientists are valuable. They need to be able to respond to their own or other people's questions or problems. Number 4, scientists create new systems and technologies, not just results. In a similar way that sports athletes create new techniques that they master by practicing. So, scientists, as a result of the scientific method and constant experiments that they make, ultimately create new methods, new technologies, such as a new biomarker test to identify and diagnose a disease or a condition early with high sensitivity and specificity for that condition. They need time to think independently and to experiment. So in summary, when any role you have develops a scientific mindset, they're bound to improve quality in all that they do, to deliver new systems, solutions, and technologies. So many of you may challenge me at this point and say, this sounds great, but it is not realistic. Look, I need some employees to just follow my orders. If I have everyone being a scientist or a sports athlete, they're not going to do the work I need them to do today, so they can pay my bills and can pay their own bills. Well, be careful about jumping to conclusions by making wrong assumptions. By encouraging independent thinking and drive, many often assume both lead to disobedience and chaos, in a similar manner that by encouraging performance and goals, most assume that they lead to order and action. On the other end of the spectrum, both assumptions are intrinsically wrong because the end result of productivity ultimately depends on the company environment and current systems or processes that are in place. Encouraging a true sports-like or scientific mindset offers greater action potential and value than a traditional corporate hierarchy. Sports athletes and scientists know that if they miss one step in their preparation, their entire experiment or their training session may fail and prevent them from advancing to an important championship or competition. Also, they have to be disciplined, as they know that they need to implement a certain amount of steps over a particular period of time so that they can then analyze them. Thus, by definition, they're both naturally disciplined and responsible. Being a sports athlete or a scientist does not replace responsibility. It includes responsibility. In fact, both take responsibility to the next level. So challenge yourself and ask what commands you have been giving your employees more often in order to grow as a company. Now, both sports athletes and scientists need a direction to plan and to visualize in order to reach a destination, a specific direction. So how you're able to pay your or their bills or be successful, however you define it, will often depend on how clearly and specifically you communicate a direction to navigate in which to sail the ship to your team members. They just need to be given multiple dimensions, and then they both need their independence. They're genuinely, naturally driven by the science or by breaking new personal records. So once you inspire your employees to be like sports athletes or scientists, regardless of their function, step aside. Like John O'Sullivan said in 1837, the best government is the one that's least governed. Set the right environment. So transformation into a growth-oriented business depends on an employee mindset that is relative, that is flexible and adaptable, rather than one that is static or absolute in a performance culture, for example. In performance-minded companies, employees are empowered to make performances rather than progress. They're not empowered to experiment or to constantly improve their quality. And this is a static or absolute mindset where something is either right or wrong, a success or failure. Whereas in a sports-like or scientific employee environment, there is almost an obsession or an intense focus on continuous growth, continuous progress. At the end of the day, it is incumbent on the executive management to create such an environment. But there's a spectrum of the degrees to which you can inspire one particular mindset versus another. And this is the notion that I'm asking you to consider. And if you choose a growth environment for your company, consider the factors that make sports athletes and scientists relevant for your team. The 4 different qualities of each of the 2 mindsets, which now you are familiar with. So in the next and last segment, I'll discuss how you can inspire your employees to adopt a sports athlete or a scientist mindset. So stay tuned. I'll be right back. Loud coach. In this last segment of the episode, I'll tell you how you can create more scientists and sports athletes among your employees. Now that I've told you why you need to create these two mindsets. And I will summarize my recommendations with two key principles I'd like you to remember by the end of this segment. So let's get started. First, remember that after you hire people, you need to reach them. That is the first principle. And it stems from an important understanding that when you hire people, you do not hire assets. So remember that you do not buy people and hire technology instead, regardless of how close artificial intelligence may be to organic intelligence, regardless of how much you may pay an employee, because you hire people who bring with them their own universes, their backgrounds, their experiences, their lessons learned, failures, their weaknesses, their characters, behaviors, their capabilities that you will need to manage and uncover. So how you reach people versus how you control products and technologies you buy are two entirely different things or processes. For example, you could always turn a technology on and off and shut it down when you want to. With people that you hire, you cannot do that. You can fire them and shut them down that way, but they're no longer working with you. They're no longer producing for you. Instead, you reach people by eliciting their emotions, because the number one thing that all people seek is the ability to share their emotions with other people. And that is what we all look for in life, regardless of how fast-paced or how emotionless a particular function or even field may be in which we are involved. As Theodore Roosevelt said, no one cares about what you know until they know that you care. Such an approach creates a so-called circle of safety. And to create such a circle of safety, you don't just hire people and then sit back and think, now they're a part of my team, so I'll push them. I'll give them orders, set some policies, so they will be completely overwhelmed by my and our current vision and engaged in our current strategy and nothing else. Because if you do so, you really lose out, particularly today, in the transformational time we're living in. Transformational leadership needs to come at the transformational time in which we find ourselves today. Be a transformational leader, not a traditional leader. This means that you have to maintain relationships with the people that you hire and for whom you already spent lots of time, resources, and money. Simply hiring employees is not enough, especially in our impatient, attention deficit, and demanding generation of new employees. Again, the first key principle to inspiring more sports athletes and scientists in your growth culture is to remember to hire people and then to reach them. The second step is also a simple one to remember, but difficult to enforce. Here it is. Give your employees one direction, not one dimension. I've already alluded to this concept previously in this episode. If you're able to give a specific direction that provides a cause, a purpose, a vision that encourages a particular behavior without restricting and narrowing the potential of your individual team members' capabilities, you will create many more sports athletes and scientists who will inspire years of growth in your company. Their efforts will be specifically targeted towards your goal as well. Thus, you will share one common destination once and if you clarify it and communicate it transparently as an executive or a leader to your employees. Not many startup companies or even established companies provide such clarity or communicate a specific destination. What this means is you have to set boundaries, but you set boundaries around directions, around destinations and behavior. You don't set boundaries on performance potential or on different dimensions that performance could take through a focus on goals alone. A valuable exercise you can use is to set aside time to discuss progress openly more than once or twice a year, to analyze your team performance and come up with a list of things to keep doing, things to start doing, and others to stop doing. Then review the list regularly and modify it as needed. AstraZeneca used to have this exercise they initiated 1 year, which was tremendously valuable. The company called it the Keep, Build, Stop exercise. It is important to give a clear direction even if it's general. Give a destination that promotes a specific behavior. So be a captain that navigates your company and provides a GPS system, if you will. Don't hold everyone accountable to one dimension, however, or a cultural fit that does not exist, nor cannot exist naturally. It is impossible to create or enforce a cultural fit because a company is not a kindergarten or elementary school in which it is possible to influence children's character. The reason I make this analogy is because after the age of somewhere between 3 and 7, depending on what psychologist you believe, our character does not change. However, unfortunately, most companies and HR departments refer to character and key general values or principles, such as integrity, passion, or innovation, when they talk about a cultural fit. Although they really mean behavior or behavior environments by the words culture or cultural fit. Thus, the culture of a company is the character of its employees times their behavior, where behavior is the most influential variable of the two. Therefore, do not forget that you cannot change any employee's character, but you can certainly change their behavior. After all, you asked behavioral questions from your employees when you hired them. Yet after you hired them, you stopped focusing on their behavior. And instead, most of the time in traditional companies, you focus on getting them to fit one dimension, whether it is innovation, passion, honesty. But that is not behavior. Character is a spectrum. It is a colorful spectrum from which you manifest different parts in different circumstances and environments through your behavior. For example, if you're a person that is honest, but you have a management that you do not trust, you might not necessarily express your honesty to that management and find other people in the company who are like-minded with whom you will express that honest part of your character through your behavior. If, on the other hand, your company has its unique trademark process or slogan that promotes a specific type of behavior, then you're probably much more likely to express such behavior regardless of your character. On the other side of the token, examples of slogans or company culture related phrases that have stuck with me over the years may include ones like winning the right way by AstraZeneca, because winning the right way encourages a particular professional type of behavior with the mindset and visualization of winning, but winning through a sportsmanlike conduct, through respect and professionalism towards others. Nike's Just Do It, perseverance, whatever you'd like to summarize these 3 words, whichever way, it gives you a specific behavior to just move forward, to keep trying, keep practicing, to be action-oriented, right? Just do it. Beautiful slogan. Bob's Red Mill is a flour company that produces high-quality flour for baking, different types of artisanal breads or different baking products. They have branded themselves and identified themselves through a slogan as an employee-oriented company that focuses the company's efforts on employees. That means that the employees' interests are defended and are supported wholeheartedly by the leadership of that company. And employees are able to provide new ideas, have a circle of safety, have a share of voice in decision making in such employee-oriented companies. So in this short 3-word phrase, the company conveys that the employees play a significant role in the company's decisions. Now, let's revisit the 2 key principles to inspiring a growth culture or environment in your team. Let's assume that you have already addressed the first factor and you have already reached your people and their emotions after hiring them by demonstrating that you treat them as unique individuals and have their best interests. Now it's time for you to give these individuals one direction that will be oriented towards one specific behavior. So many businesses spend so much time and so many resources on asking behavioral questions when they hire employees, yet they do not always take advantage of the opportunity to inspire their behavior to continue in one specific direction after they're hired. So if you're able to inspire your employees to behave in one direction towards a common destination, you're able to create not just performance, but synergy. And synergy between people is far more than performance. Synergy results in growth, and growth is continuous and long-term, while performance is episodic. Growth occurs fastest when there is collaboration or synergy, and not just performance, in which the total of individual efforts are greater than their sum. You can apply both principles I've discussed through an exercise, through a communication, through a slogan that you review and modify over time as needed. But once you follow the 2 key principles and communicate them, just step aside, observe, and analyze the behavior of your employees, and analyze it frequently and regularly to let them create new solutions, new systems. This way, you will be able to inspire your employees to think like sports athletes or scientists and lead to constant growth of your company. Once you complete your analysis, tell them what they need to keep, start, or stop doing so that you can monitor the rate of their growth and progress. Now let's review the ultimate value proposition expressed in terms of net relative growth in a performance versus growth organization. In a performance-based company culture, there's a zero-sum game that inevitably takes place, where there are individuals who are high performers, but they see their high performance coming at the expense of other individuals in the team based on the expectations to which they've been exposed. As a result, employees are encouraged to compete against each other and often undermine each other to survive or rise up in the ranks at the expense of respect or sportsmanlike conduct. Again, because these are the expectations or the environment to which they have been exposed. Thus, the performance of many that results in growth is cancelled out by the low performance of others and their decline, negative growth, disengagement, and employee attrition or turnover. However, in a true growth mindset company, individuals' collective performance always has a positive net relative value when the individual efforts are added together. Progress, no matter how slow, is never penalized in a growth organization. When you see that your team members' rate of progress is slower than desired or is slowing down, communicate directly and specifically with the individual and provide alternative or new resources and directions that will not just teach but involve the person so that the rate of progress and growth picks up speed. But in this growth type of organization, that employee is competing against themselves. The employees try to break personal records. They try to increase the rate of growth over time of their own performance. Monitor the rate of growth through regular and frequent discussions, and you'll guarantee growth. You'll guarantee positive net value from your every single employee. Ultimately, increased individual growth and synergy of your team members' efforts, when combined, will allow your organization to grow and develop. If you're a small business or startup, you'll be able to scale and become a mid-sized or a big established company. Or will be that much more appealing to a new business partner that is already organized with its long-standing systems and is established. If you are an established company, these two principles that I'm highlighting in this segment of the episode will allow you to further scale your culture and growth. Consider new ways to diversify your business and lengthen the life cycle of your organization. Whether you're a small company or a large established company, these two key principles are going to be very important for you to consider in order to maintain and to improve growth, in order to create more innovation, transformation through the scientists and through the sports athletes that you create. Let's now summarize the key points of the 3 segments of this episode and put all these ideas together. There are 2 main types of business organizations, growth and performance cultures. And there are 7 major differences between them, respectively, between growth and performance cultures. Number 1, dialogue versus command-based communication among employees. Number 2, science versus power-based decision-making. Number 3, content versus impressions focus on product brands and pipelines. Number 4, reality versus perception-based reaction to change in the environment. Number 5, person versus customer-centered service. Number 6, sports versus war type of competition among employees. And 7, intentions versus results-based evaluation of employees' contributions. To become a growth organization, inspire all your employees to be sports athletes or scientists because of the following qualities. Here are the 4 key attributes of sports athletes that all your employees should emulate. Number 1, they try to break personal records. Number 2, they compete by the rules with respect for others. Number 3, they learn to pass the baton and to collaborate. Number 4, they practice to master new techniques. Here are 4 key qualities of scientists that all your employees should model. Number 1, they constantly make observations. Number 2, they ask questions and make hypotheses. Number 3, they create new solutions to problems. Number 4, they create new systems and technologies. Organizations may inspire their team members to become sports athletes or scientists to deliver growth and productivity through 2 key principles. Number 1, hire employees and then reach them as individuals. Number 2, give employees one direction instead of one dimension in which to contribute. With those thoughts, I'm going to conclude my episode, and I'm excited about hearing how the information I reviewed applies to your organization today, and what perspectives you may find useful and integrate into your current or future teams tomorrow. This is my first episode in my series on company culture. Stay tuned for the next episode in this series. please make sure to leave me your thoughts, suggestions, and questions, and contact me anytime directly. Have a great day and feel free to share with those who may consider this episode valuable and practical. Thank you.